this is Animat, and welcome back to a bonus episode of the Muppet Vlog. And this time around, instead of looking into one of the regular episodes of The Muppet Show, I am going to be looking into the Muppet Valentine Special. Now, in case you don't know what that is, the Muppet Valentine Special is known to be one of the two pilots that would eventually become The Muppet Show that we know today. The second one, of course, being the more famous The Muppet Show, unofficially titled Sex and Violence. But with the Muppet Valentine Special, what is actually very interesting to note is that there are actually some similarities, like there are some elements in this pilot that they have taken that would eventually be like kind of the format into the Muppet Show, but at the same time you could definitely tell there are some clear differences. Instead of this being a complete variety show where this is pretty much about Kermit the Frog putting on an entire show for his audience, instead, this one acts more like a regular TV show where it's not set on a show, but instead it's set on a regular house where there's just a bunch of Muppets living together, and often they would have special guest stars. So it's less about the variety and more about the Muppets living in this household. And the host, it's not actually Kermit, even though he does appear in this special. It's actually a Muppet made for that special alone, which is Wally, who is known to be a writer. Now, since it is a Valentine special, this one is a lot more focused on love. Like, if they wanted to make the show, like, a lot more formatted to something like this, it wouldn't be all about love. Like, it wouldn't be all about, like, Valentines and love and stuff like that. Like, it's just that Valentine's was, like, kind of the theme of that particular pilot. So, in this case, Wally was trying to figure out, like, what is love, and he's trying to write about love, but he suffered a bit of writer's block, and he would ask all of his friends that live in his house, like, what is their definition of love, what did they think of what love is, and all that kind of stuff, while other shenanigans kind of happen at the same time. But what is actually very interesting to note is that in this one, unlike the Sex and Violence pilot, this one actually brought in a special guest star. This actually brought in, which in this case is actually Mia Farrow. And interestingly enough, she was pregnant at the time, so she was quite a trooper there, like actually helping out with this pilot and actually performing some of the songs, actually. And on top of that, what is interesting to note is that a lot of the Muppets that are prominently featured in there, they would actually later appear in the Muppet Show, rather they be known as like prominent characters or just extras on the side. Now there are a few like Droop or Thog, they would be treated a bit more like extras when they would appear in the Muppet Show, but like even though Thog would probably be a lot more present, like he's a bit unmistakable. You can't really cast him as an extra considering that he is one of the larger Muppets that would tower even the special guest stars. But there are also others that would actually be prominent characters, especially in Season 1. Now, of course, in this special, it does feature Kermit the Frog, but he's not the host. He's just there on the side. Now, Kermit is pretty much Jim Henson's signature Muppet, so he always appears how he is in like either Sam and Friends or Sesame Street, so he was just there to appear as kind of the like superstar in a way, where he would just be there and telling them some of his stories that he knows of, while being like he does have a bit of an egotistical side of him, like that he prominently shows into this into the special. While at the same time, what is actually very interesting that I find is that it's in this special where we learn about two characters in particular who are very prominent in Season 1 and unfortunately only prominent in Season 1, which includes Mildred, which in this special she's more of like a motherly figure, and there's also George the Janitor. Now, George the Janitor in Season 1, he would be more like one of the regular Muppets. He would be like side by side with either like Kermit or Fozzie or Gonzo or any of those Muppets. But with Mildred, she would later on appear in the Muppet Show, but only at the dance sequences where she would be dancing with George. And I kind of realize that throughout season 1 there is that little Easter egg of the Muppets Valentine special, because you would always see Mildred dancing with George, kind of a bit of a reference to this. So that is a bit clever in a sense. So like, it is a cute little reference, but at the same time there are some other Muppets that did appear. There was like a dog character called Rufus, but oddly enough, I actually remember him more as Muppy when he would appear in, like later on when he would be in the Muppet Show. Or like, maybe this is supposed to be another dog character, but he's more like it's pretty much using the same Muppet who we would know later on as Muppy. But one thing I would have to say that is very fascinating is actually with the overall tone of the Muppets Valentine special. With what they were going for in here, I would have to say this is a lot more kid-friendly. This isn't really focused on trying to go for the whole family. This one looks more like it's trying to entertain more for the kids, more so than like both for kids and adults to enjoy. So like, you could definitely tell, especially when there was like a little moment when it's just Rufus trying to be like a cute little dog, and like when Mia Farrow would mention like what kind of dog she wants, like Rufus would just over-exaggeratingly represent like what kind of dog that she would want. So you could tell there is a lot more of a child-friendly tone, but it is understandable how it is like that, because considering during that period, this was back when Jim Henson was like trying to get out a little bit of Sesame Street and wanted to try something new. So he was pretty much still fresh on his mind doing kid-friendly entertainment in the same veins of Sesame Street. So it does leak in a little bit to what we see in here. Now, like I previously stated before, this isn't really variety-ish, and this one sticks more as a regular episode, considering that it has an overall theme of love. Every single thing that is mentioned, it has to do with love. Which is not really like what I could say with the regular Muppet Show, where it has more of a variety. Like, this is considered a lot more of a variety show, since it doesn't always stick to the regular story. Sometimes they would stop for a moment and go with a completely different tone, or like have a completely different segment where they would sing like this random song that doesn't really have to do anything with what's going on with the backstory, but you know, like, at least it's there to show like just Muppets doing their old song and dance routine. And like, they do so in the Muppet Valentine special, or in the Muppet Valentine show per se, they would actually like fixate with this one specific theme, and which in this case is love. But what is interesting to note is that the setup that they have done, it is very similar to what would eventually be in the Muppet Show, because in here there are a lot of musical segments on top of the comedy, and they actually do sing a lot of the songs. They would sing love, like they would start out singing "Love Is a Simple Thing," and then they would sing "Froggy Went a Courtin'," and then like Mia Farrow would sing with Thog "Real Live Girl." And then, let's see, she would also have, like, a tender, like, she would also have, like, Mia Farrow having a bit of a tender moment with Rufus singing, "Believe me if any of those endearing, believe me if all those endearing young charms." And finally, they would end off with, "We Got Love." So it does have a bit of the same order as the Muppet Show in a way, where they would do musical segments, and that, I believe this is where probably it got the theme of having having some song and dance moments, and on top of having some special guest stars. And I just realized right now, there are a few other Muppets that I realized that I kind of skipped through that would also appear in the Muppet Show later on, two of which I forgot, which actually, there's one that's called Crazy Donald, which we would know later on as Crazy Harry, like the mad guy, like the mad exploding guy that always likes to blow up stuff no matter what. Like, even if you say something like bang, like he would just come up going, "Did somebody say bang?" and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, actually, what is actually very interesting is that Crazy Donald actually is is actually the only, I think, the only Muppet that actually appears in both pilots. So you can definitely tell that at least Jim Henson and crew really wanted to make this character very prominent, and they really did not want to let him go and try to have him be prominently featured in the show. No matter how many tries they would do it, that like they really want him to be in there. But I will have to say, he doesn't sound as manic as he ultimately would become in the Muppet Show. Like, he actually is more clearly spoken, and like, he does go with the same gag all the time of "Did somebody say bang?" On top of that, there is also another character that I really find that is interesting in here, is actually Miss Mousy. Now, when Kermit would sing the song "Froggy Went the Courtin'," this was before the age of Miss Piggy. So basically, with the segment of Froggy Went a-Courtin', Miss Mousy was set up kind of the love interest to Kermit the Frog. And what's actually very interesting to note is that there are a few moments where they actually throw back into that moment where Kermit would go out with Miss Mousy. Well, you know, it's actually very fascinating how, like, there was at one point where they tried to set up Miss Mousy with Kermit, but then they ultimately let that go. But they have done a few references to those into the Muppet Show. And one more thing I would like to mention is that there actually is one segment here that they would later on completely recreate into the Muppet Show, is considering that they go into the theme of love. One of the segments that they would like to do in the Muppet Valentine special is that often you would enter into the planet Coosbane and see what's going on in there. And Kermit would actually report of kind of like this mating ritual going on in the planet Coosbane with a male Coosbane and a female Coosbane, and which would ultimately lead into what we know as the Galio Hoop Hoop. And, you know, it's interesting how they started out with this, and then they would ultimately recreate it into the Muppet Show with a much more elaborate set. Like, you could tell in the Muppet Show they had a much bigger budget than they would in the Muppet Valentine special. But, you know, it actually is one of the perfect contrasts that you could definitely check out with how they started out with the Muppet Valentine special, and then ultimately you could go check it out with, like, how they've ultimately become with the Muppet Show. I think it's either in the first season or the second season that they completely remade the Galio Hoop Hoop in the Muppet Show. But yeah, definitely an interesting contrast. So overall, I would say it definitely is an interesting watch, just to see like where some of the origins of the some of the elements of the Muppet Show came from. Now, overall, like as a show in itself, it is very, like, you could tell that it is made more for kids than something like the Muppet Show. You could tell that when they're fixated on one thing, like they really try to push it far. And, like, it can get on your nerves a little bit when they always go into something like love all the time. But I would say, overall, it's very fascinating to see where they would take all these elements that would ultimately become the Muppet Show. Pretty much the setup of musical numbers, where they would also get some of the characters like Kermit the Frog, Crazy Harry, Mildred, George the Janitor, Droop, Fogg, and all those guys. Like, to see, like, how they would eventually fit into the Muppet Show. And also the incorporation of special guest stars, which is actually very interesting. So, a lot of, like, you could definitely tell where some of these elements from the Muppet Valentine show would actually become the Muppet Show. And, you know, it's gonna, you know, actually, it is very interesting. Like, eventually, if you're going to take the Muppet Valentine special, and then, like, later on, you would take something like the Muppet Show Sex and Violence, combine the two, and then you would become, it would pretty much become the Muppet Show. But, I'll go and do, like, I'll pretty much make those, like, combining elements. I promise to you guys I'll do that analytics when I will look into Muppet Show Sex and Violence in the future. Or at least, like, you could check out, if that video is already released, then you could go check it out now. I don't know. Like, I'm just speaking in the tense that, like, I'm recording this right now. But anyways, yeah, that is pretty much it for the Muppets Valentine's Show pilot. And with that said, I just want to say thank you guys so much for watching. And with all that said, we will see next time, eventually later, when we will look into the next pilot that they have. So, thank you guys so much for watching, and until next time, see you later, dudes!